Hey, I'm Dawn Marie Solis with EQ Solutions and Neuro Awesome Life, and I am here today with Yarona Boster. She is with Footprints Coaching and is a certified life coach with a focus on parenting. And there's more to that. And she gave me the whole list, and I said, "No, you're going to say all that because my brain won't hold it." Um, but I'm really excited to be talking because parenting as a neurodivergent person, um, parenting is a unique journey no matter what. When you're a neurodivergent person, the world can kind of make you feel deficient anyways. And then you want to parent, and there are certain things that may be extra hard for you, or you may not even feel like you can do. Um, I'm autistic, ADHD, and a handful of other things, but I didn't know when I was raising my kids. I have three now adult children, and I didn't understand my sensory issues. So three kids wanting to like touch me and be on me and talk to me and need like a lot of needing me, and I would get so exhausted and overwhelmed and snippy and not always my best self. And I think everybody's sometimes as a parent not always their best selves. I mean, there's only so much tiny humaning you can do in a day, no matter who you are. But whether you know you are neurodivergent, whether you understand your needs or not, this parenting journey for us as neurodivergent folks, I think needs a lot more attention and compassion. So I'm so happy, Yorona, that you are here with me. Can you just let everybody know a little bit more about yourself and how you landed in this particular version of life coaching?
Yes, absolutely. So, as Dawn said, I'm Yarona Boster. I am an advanced life certified life coach, and I am a I'm a life coach with an expertise in parenting, loss, trauma, and infertility. Now, I know that's a handful, but today we'll concentrate on the parenting aspect of it, although my personal belief it's all interwoven. And I see the interconnectivity of it, but sometimes it's hard for others to get a handle on. So the really shortened version of how I got here is that it took me a while with my career path. I wound around a bit after leaving college, and after all of those degrees, I kind of went off the path, and then I veered back into this world where children were involved, even though I wasn't a parent at the time, because of my niece and nephew. They were severely disabled.
Mm.
They both had a very rare recessive genetic disorder, Aicardi-Goutieres syndrome, and they were not diagnosed at the time. My sister didn't know what was going on with my niece until she was about, I want to say, 6 months old. They started seeing developmental issues. So the doctors did a lot of testing. They could not figure it out. They told her they thought it was a fluke. They did genetic testing. Unfortunately, at the time, they didn't have a genetic test for this particular disease because it was so rare. So a few years later, my sister had my nephew, and they quickly realized there was something going on genetically. So that kind of was the impetus for me being pushed into the field of early intervention, which is a program for babies birth to 3 with developmental delays and disabilities. Now, every state in the United States has some component of early intervention, whether it's a federally mandated version or a combination of the federal mandate under the IDEA Act and the a state version. In New Jersey, it's called Part C. So my sister actually kind of pushed me into it by telling this person who was her children's OT, who also ran her own agency, to hire me as her early intervention program coordinator, because I'm extremely overly efficient and and very, very, very good at managing people, projects, programs, all that sort of stuff. So I kind of slipped into it, but my background is in public health. So that was where my degrees came from. So I kind of slipped into it with the understanding of where my background was and where I was going. And then I really just jumped in wholeheartedly. And for 15 years, I moved from one agency to another. And for 15 years, well, one agency for 2 years, and then the other one for 13. I ran a program for EI. And what is interesting about that path is it's the first time parents gain an awareness that their child may have a developmental delay or disability. And we are seeing a lot of earlier diagnoses of autism on the spectrum, ADHD, and things of that nature, behavioral disorders, sensory disorders, and so on. What I find that I see the hardest struggle with for parents in this position is the overwhelm of not knowing what to do, when the truth is most parents don't know what to do in the first place. Even your parents of your, neurotypical children. But there's also a guilt. It's like the parents feel like they did something wrong. They were lacking in some way that caused this to happen for their child. And just coming to terms with it and making some sort of sense and peace with it out of the mess of the unknown. And I say that with all kindness because you never know. You never know. However, I have seen parents limit their children who have diagnoses because they think that's the right thing to do. When I say that they shouldn't be defined by their diagnoses, it's just a way to get help. It's just a way to understand yourself. If you have a diagnosis, it's just a way to understand yourself better, understand your own needs, and a way to better function, and a way to get the help you need. So it's something that I know that a lot of people struggle with. And I am an information person. You throw a problem at me, but then you give me the information of the problem. If I don't know what it is, I'm going to be more nervous and more scared than if I understand what it is, and then I can utilize everything tool in my power to actually address it.
Yeah, you and I bonded a little bit over that shared quality. Information is my life raft always. Like,
I love
just
information.
it's interesting because that's not the case for everyone. More information can increase anxiety in others, right? And
Yeah,
so that's one of the unique things about recognizing that we all think and learn and process differently, is
yeah,
that what stabilizes you may
right.
be destabilizing for someone else. And as parents, I don't feel like our society does a good job letting us know that we might have children who think, learn, and function entirely differently from us, even though they are the product of our genes.
Right. Isn't
like
that
like we
incredible?
can really understand that if somebody is adopted or they are a foster child or something like that, but we sort of get taught, well, if they have my genes, they should be like me. And
Right. Ooh, that's a hard
especially if you're
one.
talking about a neurodivergent family, and we're now starting to understand that autism, ADHD, those sorts of things do have a genetic component.
Right.
um when you're talking about a family who is neurodivergent, they may not be that way in the same ways. Somebody who really needs touch in order to be able to emotionally regulate and learn and stuff like
Right.
that, and maybe a parent who's touch sensitive and can't
Right.
handle, right? Those
Right.
things just compound that sense of guilt and shame and stuff like that parents have, because we don't have a compassionate sense
Right.
of supporting parents. We say, you popped that kid out, you must know how to deal with it, you must know how to do everything, and shame on you if you don't. And I'm actively writing
Yeah.
a book exactly about that we've
Oh,
got to start, one, educating so much more so that we know what it is to become a parent and to have children,
yeah.
but also so much more compassion for ourselves and for each
Oh,
other.
yeah. That's going
That
to be a part of my book too. I'm writing one as well, and that should be out at the end of this year.
Yay.
But because to your point, I'd like to address that. I think, and the opposite is true too. Like if you're a parent who wants to give your child a hug and they don't want to be touched, that can feel very deflating as a parent. Oh, they don't love me. That's not necessarily the signal that's coming out here. You have to understand that it goes both ways with empathy. What there's a thing called the platinum rule, which is bigger and better than the golden rule, in my opinion, because it's do unto others as they would want done for themselves. The positioning of that is really that it's the tool of empathy. In order to give somebody what they need may be different from what you need. The golden rule implies to do unto others as you would want done for yourself, but the truth is they might want something different. So we have to address it from that perspective, ask what they need, and then give that to them. And it goes to a bigger point of autonomy. There's two things I want to say here. One is that we forget that you said something about, parents like think, oh, genetically, if they're a part of me, they must be like me. And it goes a step further. Therefore, they must want to follow in my path. They must follow in my path. They need to be my mini me. They need to live my shadow. Well, I say that the first step to parenting is recognizing your child's autonomy, recognizing that they are their own human being. And yes, clinically, the research now does show that psychologically, um, it's about 40 to 60% of your personality traits and potential mental health disorders and things of that nature are actually genetically coded. They're coded in your DNA. So if you maybe even are like an introvert, that may be a part, it literally may be a part of your DNA. And you cannot, and you're like about 40 to 60% somewhere. And some days you're more and some days you're less. So if socialization drains you and you need time to process and be on your own, that is perfectly acceptable and normal. And that should be your greater awareness of your own needs. And then the ability to verbalize that to other people will give you a greater sense of self-awareness and the autonomy to make those decisions for yourself. So the other thing that you said, which I think is really important, and I say this all the time, there's no society on this planet that requires people to read a book or take a basic child development course to learn how to be a stable, healthy parent before becoming one. So we have this crazy thing of biology that gives us this, if you want to call it miracle of life, the ability to procreate. And yet so few people are ready to be a parent and understand what it means for their child, their little human, to grow into a bigger human and how they can play a role in that development. Right? Because children, they're not separate from adults. We don't come to a place in our adulthood and suddenly, or we don't come to an age and suddenly go, yeah, I'm no longer a child and I've forgotten my entire childhood and my past doesn't matter. Now I'm starting fresh as an adult. No, that doesn't happen. We carry that forward with us. So more often than not, I don't know about you, but the way people see me on the outside, that's not how I feel on the inside. I still remember little Yarona. I still remember playing in the treehouse. I still have vivid recollections of my childhood, sense memories that will never go away. So there are times I still even feel like that child. And it
Well,
doesn't change.
it's interesting too, some of the most recent research that's coming out about how especially autistic folks' brains develop. There's and I don't have the right terminology for it, but people can go look this up if they're interested in more information. There's a thing that happens for people who are not autistic when they leave a particular age. Something in their brain sets up like a little organizational file, right? And it says, this is your 0 to 5-year-old self, right? Da. And that person will have a sense of being that person, but kind of leaving that person and becoming their 5 to 10-year-old and their 10 to 14-year-old and their autistic people tend not to have those organizational files, those dividing lines between their ages, which is part of a theory of why autistic people often, well into adulthood, may appear more childlike,
Mm.
um, may not age the same way physically. Um, we literally can feel as though we are simultaneously living all moments in our life. Um, we can call forward, like you just said, our tiny selves
Mhm.
as though they're present. And it's a really interesting thing to feel. Um, Sometimes autistic people will sort of get to a point where they no longer sort of mentally log the passage of time. So they kind of stay at a particular age.
Mhm.
And it can be very hard as they physically age because they'll see themselves in the mirror and they'll be like, I don't know who that is. Because when I think of myself, how I am on the inside, my emotional development, all of those things are kind of a few years ago. Um, so yeah, that sense of separation from a former self,
Yeah.
isn't as strong or may not even exist for an autistic person.
That makes so much sense too for the way the world functions in this day and age. And, I don't know about you, I still feel like it's this chicken and egg mystery, of the which came first. But, we have certainly noticed a trend towards a higher level of diagnoses of people on the spectrum over these last 20, 30 years. And I think some days, and this is just me postulating, but there are some days where I think it is an evolutionary event. It is just, it's kind of like if you've ever watched the X-Men or things of that nature, like, and you believe in any of that stuff, like there is something to the mutation that happens, if you want to call it that, just the change in the DNA structure, whatever it may be, that is changing the way our society functions. And I think there's so many components to it that we could look at and take perspective on. But I definitely think a piece of the way that we function in society in this day and age, with so much happening at once, it's so overwhelming. And this is for neurotypical people as well. People think that boredom is a bad thing in this day and age. So they're forever scrolling, they're forever doing things, they're forever looking at things, they're getting their kids to do 10,000 activities after school and keep them busy from sun up to sundown and past. And the weekends are so like, let's pack you in and do this and on this day and this on this day. And there's something to be said for this. We've left boredom behind, when the truth is, when you read the literature, the research on it, there's a component to boredom that breeds creativity. So, because it allows for your brain to rest, and in that resting pattern, it allows the neurons to make new connections, but you're not allowing them to make new connections. It's kind of like sleep. I was just having this conversation with somebody, the importance of sleep. And we were talking about how, like, she tries to avoid sleep. I'm like, but if you read about sleep and why it's so important, it's literally like charging your battery. Like, if you wouldn't let your phone just run down until it's done and then not recharge it. Sleep is your recharger. But boredom, when you're in your awake moments, is just as pivotally important. So I think that we as a society need to slow down. We need to allow ourselves to slow to the point where we can be. And going back to what you said about the, people on the spectrum and people with a variety of diagnoses do not leave their childhood behind. A part of early childhood is the ability for children who are in that 0 to 5 range to remain present in the moment. As we move along in aging, something happens to the present maintenance that changes. And then we're forever looking forward, forever looking back, forever looking forward, looking back. What do I want for my future? What do I want for my future? And we forget that the only time we really have is right now. And so the beauty of a child to be able to maintain their presence in a moment. I'll give you an example. It's one of the reasons why when kids are little and they start going to school and they come and you pick them up from school and you ask them, so what'd you do today? And they're like, I don't know. Guess what, people? One of the reasons kids say that, even into their teens, is because they're living in the present moment. As they get a little older, they're starting to perseverate more on a particular issue that happened, a negative such situation, such that they lose focus on the present and on what occurred throughout that day. And that filters into our adulthood. And then it's that future, past, future, past, future, past. But wouldn't it be a beautiful gift if everyone could just simply maintain their presence?
We have entire, meditation philosophies and psychotherapy philosophies and things like that to help develop that as a skill.
Yeah.
I'm in agreement with everything that you said. Additionally, I'd like to add that what all of this looks like is uniquely individual. So what's slowing down for one person isn't going to be the same as slowing down for somebody else. What creative boredom moment looks like for one person is going to be very different from someone else. And I think one of the things that's really hard is if you go into like a Barnes and Noble or you're scrolling YouTube and you're looking for that self-help stuff, so much of it is follow this formula, do A, B, C, and D, and all will be right with the world. And we have bajillions of YouTube and TikTok and books and all of that for self-help because there isn't one. There is no one formula for any of us, whether we're neurodivergent or not. Back to what you were saying about the evolutionary thing. I'm with you on that. I also think that because, especially when it comes to autism and ADHD, they were both assigned male at birth. Right? Like when they started thinking about autism and ADHD, they decided it was a male sexed thing. And we've learned since that it is not, that people who are sexed female at birth also are autistic and ADHD and many other identities. But also we're finally starting to think about these things beyond the deficit and medical perspective.
Yeah.
And so in my world, and people don't have to agree with me, but in my world, at least when it comes to autism, ADHD, dyslexia, and dyscalculia, these are not deficiencies, deficits, or disorders first. They are a legitimate way that the brain processes information, the way the brain learns, the way the brain interacts with the world, that can come with accompanying disabilities, can come with difficulties. The example I tend to use is for somebody who's tall. We don't think of them as disabled, but the world can be very disabling to them. Right? My husband is 6 foot tall, but his proportions make it incredibly difficult for him to get in and out of a car. He's all torso. He's little short, he's 6 foot tall and I'm 5'5", and he's got shorter legs than I do, right? He's all torso. Getting in and out of a car is very difficult for him. We have to, like you talk about test driving a car, we actually have to try cars on, like clothing, right? Like, can you get in and out of the door? How do you know? I can't even get in, let alone get out, right? We don't think to look at him, no one's going to think, oh, you're all torso, you're disabled.
Right.
And until we start talking about not being able to find clothes that fit, there aren't shirts that are long enough, not being right. The things that happen because of simply the way he's shaped. That's disabling, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So one of the things I've talked about in terms of the DSM, which is the psychiatric manual of disorders and diseases, autism and ADHD are listed in there. I don't agree with that personally because I don't think of it as a
Mm.
disorder or disease. But if you look at, we'll just take autism, like almost number one is difficulty maintaining eye contact.
Right.
There are cultures in this world right now where you'd never be able to tell if somebody was autistic based on eye contact because it's built into the culture that you don't
Culture.
look each other in the eyes. Right. So are they just all autistic? Like when that culture was evolving, were they like all autistic? So we're like, okay, we won't look each other in the eyes forever and ever. Amen. Right. Like a lot of what is described as the autistic person is actually a modern perspective on social behavior.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
social behavior is in constant evolution.
Oh, yes. a
A
hundred
hundred
percent. That,
years
yeah.
ago, we did not behave. I mean, look at me. I'm in short sleeves. I've got a
Right.
V-neck, right? Like my ankles are showing. Right?
Oh,
Like
no.
100 years ago, and I'm a hussy, right? And for today, I'm very modestly dressed. I'm in a full length dress, like I'm mostly covered up, right?
Right,
There's
right.
it's V-neck, but it's like up here, no,
Mhm,
right?
mhm.
I'm very modestly dressed for today.
Sure. Yeah.
So these ideas that we have about social interaction, things like that, they are a specific construct from a particular moment in time.
Yeah.
And we paste those onto everyone as though they are the physics laws of the universe. And I personally reject that. I think that we should be trying to figure out how everybody functions.
Individually.
Right.
Yeah.
And then figuring out how we relate to one another with all
Right.
of these different types of functions.
Okay. I would like to touch on that. Well, I want to piggyback off of something you said before about going into a Barnes and Noble or online and looking for self-help. So one of the things that I say specifically, and I say this to all of my clients, I say this to every person I meet, is that strategies are only as good as the person you who uses them. The person has to be capable of finding the strategies that work for them. And that even changes over time. So this is the same thing with parenting. What might work with your 2-year-old might not work with your 5-year-old. So all the strategies you're using as a parent are ever evolving and ever changing as well. And same for yourself. Coping mechanisms, they change. For instance, okay, my son, we used to do like a counting thing, like, okay, I'll give you 5 minutes or 7 minutes. Which do you want? Like the choices and stuff like that. Well, he's only 5, but he's already figured us out on that one. And he's like, nope, I'm not going to choose a time. I don't want to choose a time. He's a smart little bunny. So we're constantly having to readjust and course correct our strategies to meet his changing needs. So it's same thing. Civilization changes over time. Humans change and evolve over time. So it's all an evolutionary aspect, which means we're always sort of behind the 8 ball on catching up. But and I go back to our information love. With information, we under by understanding that that's going to be a course of events. Your child is going to grow, develop, and change. Where your 5-year-old loved to snuggle with you, your 15-year-old is probably going to be embarrassed as anything, and to snuggle with you, right? So we're constantly changing that, and that understanding, just having that knowledge, changes the way we inform ourselves and how we can move with the flow. Now, what's very interesting is that most people do not have a basic understanding of literally basic child development. I was at a conference the other day, a couple weeks ago, and I asked the conference goers, does anybody here know the 5 areas of early childhood development, the 5 domains? And everybody was like, uh, uh, I'm like, see, if we could basically, if we could just give them the basics, that would be amazing. So now, what I have a tendency to say is that if you're unwilling to learn and you're unwilling to go with the flow of change, that change is as inevitable as breathing, and that even breathing is limited to the time we have on this earth. If you understand that those basic tenets, and you can absorb that and get comfortable with the discomfort that may do for you, your capacity to turn on a dime and make a change and course correct your strategies to address your child's needs are going to be more adaptable. That said, we also understand there's a difference between even just the neurotypical male brain versus the neurotypical female brain. We call the male brain the box brain and the female brain the spaghetti brain. That's because women have a tendency to just be capable of cross-pathing all the time and interconnecting varied things. So women are a lot more, generally speaking, again, assigned at birth, women are, or females assigned at birth, are capable of leaning their brain a lot more in those directions, that fluidity and that the capacity for change. Whereas male brains have a more structured, definitive, I open this box, I deal with that thing, I close that box, I go to the next box. And it can be very self-limiting. So the more men are capable of, or males are capable of absorbing that idea of fluidity to your adaptability skills, the better they'll be capable of parenting in that regard. Now, that said, I do want to touch on this one thing because we were talking about it earlier, and oh man, my brain just went out my ear and I forgot what it was. We were talking about this idea of not necessarily perfectionism in parenting, but what was it we were saying about well, I was talking about like, why is it that we feel guilty when we're not a
Right.
perfect parent, right?
I don't even know what perfect parents look like. I just feel like
Because there
that's
is no
such an
such thing.
illusion, right? There's no such thing, and it's not possible.
There's no such thing. And more than that, we know we're far from perfect humans. So why do we think we can adapt to a role that role should take on some kind of level of perfectionism? We put so much weight on that and stress on that. And then when we mess up, here's the problem with that. Pretending you don't mess up as a parent means your kids get stressed and anxiety induced, and they start to just be disappointed in themselves for not being able to meet your high standards. Because guess what, people? What you do is going to be a lot more effective than what you say to your children. So if your child is paying attention to what you do, and a lot of what we do is not even on a fully conscious awareness level, like take cursing, okay? I have so many situations in which parents would be like, oh, how could you say such a thing? And they would get upset with their kid for saying a curse. And then the next room, dad is like cursing up a storm. And then the dad's like, don't say that. Like, so the moment we start to humanize ourselves to our kids, and that means showing them and admitting to the mistakes we make, showing them our mistakes and admitting to those mistakes is one of the really most basic ways we can humanize ourselves to our kids. And that reduces this need for perfection, egocentric based parenting, where it's like, you do what I say because I'm your parent and I said so. Uh, you don't have a supreme role there. You're just one human trying to raise another human being. And I think that so many parents do themselves and their kids a disservice because you hear kids talking about the stress that they're under these days because their parents don't just expect them to go to school and then come home, do their homework and play with their friends. No, their parents expect them to go to school, come home, study, do their homework, study the next lessons, take extra courses, go, join the soccer team, join this, join that. The schedule is out the wazoo. Stop scheduling your kids for things. Follow their directives. My son he does like these dance moves and karate stuff and all. He does that all around the house. And my husband and I are Like we pay attention. Okay, this is something he's interested in. Fabulous. We'll move with that interest. If he drops that interest, we'll move on to the next thing. Have you ever heard of the term um, Renaissance man?
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, it's basically like somebody who's capable of doing many variety of different things in the world.
Right.
We need to breed that back into the way we parent. We need to bring that back into the way we parent. It is not bad if your kid is naturally gifted at violin, wonderful, and they're interested in doing the violin. Okay, there have to be two components to this, not just that they're gifted at something, but they have to be intrinsically motivated to want to do that thing. So if those two things are the case, sure, start getting them violin lessons, so put them in the chorus or the band or whatever it is, the music, the department. But if they tell you that they're no longer interested in it, don't shame them and blame them for all the effort and time and energy that you put into it. You minimize their experience and their desire to reach out for something new and something different. And exploration is necessary for that. And I will tell you, you breed, I hate to say the word breed, I keep saying that word, I'm not sure why, but you will raise a much more emotionally secure and emotionally stable human being if you allow them the capacity and the room to dabble here, dabble there, experiment here, explore here, and lean into where their interests go, and then lean in the next direction. That exploration builds a level of confidence and security. And you're just there to be the safety net. That's what you are as a parent, the safety net.
So that was my theory, raising my kids, and I got a lot of flack, a lot of criticism. Your kids are never gonna know how to stick to something. They're gonna quit everything. And my kids have come back to me and said that it was a sort of dual journey. One was they got to try a lot of things, and the things that they really didn't like, they were appreciated. No one was forcing them to do them. Um, but my way of doing it, they also felt lacked enough sort of parental guidance in the stick it out space. So I do think that and again, it's going to depend on the individual child, um, and how they are as a human. But I do think that there's a way to embrace the fact that they are a child. They're supposed to be trying 90 different things. They're supposed to, right? Their interests are going to sway. Some kids won't. Some kids will latch onto one thing and they won't want to do anything else. And there's nothing you're going to be able to do about that.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that it isn't a binary.
Right.
Either you pick something and stick to it, or you're grounded. You're letting everybody down. You're responsible, right? Or maybe the way I went about it was like half a second into questioning whether or not they should quit. I was like, okay, we don't have to do it. It's all fine. Right. And I know now that was my trauma. Right. I
Yeah.
was so worried about imposing upon my
Mm-hmm.
children that I was too quick
Right.
to, I would ask them, are you sure? But all I'd have to do is be like, yeah, I'm sure. Okay. Well, we won't do it. We'll throw everything away. It'll be fine. Right. Um, and so
Well,
it's been interesting having adult children being able to self-analyze and look back, and
yeah.
who knows if they're right, right?
Well,
It's
I
all
think there's a
theoretical.
balance.
Yeah,
I think the point is that it's not binary, it's a balance beam. It's a
right.
balance beam. And sometimes we have to course correct. And sometimes we don't even know until we've fallen off the balance beam that we were going in the wrong direction. So the problem is that your kids are going to find fault with your parenting no matter what you do. It's true. I hate to say it, guys, but own the fact that your kids will find fault in something you've done. And it's a part of it. And it's a part of the growth cycle. And it's a part of the process to be able to look back. There's a reason hindsight is 2020, because we can look back at it and have a lot more clarity. Perspective taking can only be done by taking that actual perspective, by taking a step back. So it's kind of like, I think it correlates a lot to when you're in a very fraught and tense moment, you have no objectivity. For instance, if you were a surgeon, you would not be able to do surgery on yourself if you're injured. if you so we need the assistance of others to give us that perspective taking. We need that from a non-judgmental space, from a space of growth, development, and empathy to be able to do that. So that's what I try really hard to do with my son, but I don't always get it right. I make mistakes. And when I do, I own those mistakes to him, because then he understands that he gets an understanding of, oh, look, my mom's not so worried about the mistakes she's makes. So why should I be? Now, I'm going to tell you something. My son is a little perfectionist, and that is totally baked into his coded DNA. I'm telling you. So we could see from early on that he would try to do a toy that wasn't his age appropriate for him. And he would get frustrated. Like when he first started playing with Legos, he was playing with Legos way too early. I'm like, there's no way his fine motor manipulation skills have developed enough to be able to play with Legos. There's my early intervention, early childhood development coming in. And I'm thinking to myself, oh, we're going to set him up for that. And then, of course, it was even worse. Like he would have a meltdown because he couldn't get the Legos just right. And every once in a while, he still does. But with repeated, like, I know, I had such a hard time with Legos when I was a kid. Oh my goodness, one time I just threw a whole batch of Legos out because I was frustrated with it. Like saying things like that. Again, it humanizes us. It also gives them a little bit of perspective taking, but still it has to function with what's baked in for them too. So like, I think it's kind of funny because now as I think about it, I also recognize that he's always going to struggle with that. There's going to be a part of him that's always going to struggle with that. And I've got to get comfortable with the discomfort that gives me, that he's going to struggle with that. When a child is born and you start to see signs of depression or things of that nature, you're going to have to find a way to get comfortable. And I don't say happy or content with it, but find a way to make peace with the fact that that's going to be a hurdle for them. And you can't clear that hurdle away for them, because you do your child a severe disservice when you try to remove their barriers and hurdles and stumbles and failures. You hurt and minimize your children. There was, you remember the college scandal with the celebrities paying for
Oh
their
yeah.
kids? Yeah. Well, I heard that there was an interview with one of the kids who no longer even speaks to his parents, and he
Mm,
said what hurt him so much was that it made him feel like his parents didn't believe in him.
yeah.
And now here on the other side of the fence was the parents thinking, we're doing great. We're setting our child up for success and we're taking care of all that for him. Well, there's a new term for that. It's called bulldozer parenting. It's no longer even helicopter parenting. It's bulldozer. You are literally trying to effectively bulldoze down the obstacles in your child's way. It is so minimizing, demoralizing, and helpless for your kids. And this is a really important question that I ask all parents. As a parent, what is the one thing you want to know before you leave this world? And most parents will answer, well, of course, I want to know my kids are going to be okay without me. Okay, then you have to start with that end goal in mind. That means you have to set up a circumstance that you at the beginning stages, you are their safety net. Yes, you're there as a safety net, but slowly that safety net gets moved further and further. The goalpost has to move. They actually have to be willing to try it on their own. And if they stumble before they hit the goalpost, they got to figure out how to pick themselves back up again. Because when you're gone, there's no longer going to be someone to pick them up. And if you're gone and they have always relied on you to be the one to pick them up, they may never get back up on their own.
Yeah, and when we're talking about parents of children who have disabilities, that's a a daily traumatizing fear. What's going to happen to my child when I'm gone? And one of the things that I work very hard on every day in my advocacy work is a society that values every human being, whether or not they are able to be employed, whether or not they're able to produce. And I think that's a rough journey for our society. The fact of the matter is, if somebody doesn't cook in the household, nobody eats, right? If somebody doesn't work, the bills don't get paid. So it's not so simple as sometimes I think it can sound.
Oh,
But
it's not simple. It's
right.
not easy. No,
But
it's not.
whether or not we have children with many needs or we have children with seemingly fewer needs, um, whether we think of ourselves as neurotypical, our children as neurotypical or neurodivergent, to me, it doesn't actually matter. What matters is that we try to figure out how to have a society so that we honor, respect, and support one another in whatever the need is. I do a lot of work with companies and organizations and teaching about neurodivergence and stuff like that. And my approach is always from a concept called universal design. And universal design is to, whenever you want to design, make, create a thing, you consider who might be excluded. And you try to design so that they belong in your system or your program or your chair or your whatever, right? You try to design so that the person least likely to be able to participate belongs there. But you do it in a way that everyone belongs. And to me, that's how we don't take from one and give to another. I don't think Robin Hood should be our ideal.
No. Agreed.
Um, the take from one to give to another can only eventually, if not right away, engender resentment.
Mm-hmm.
We
And
see
it,
this with siblings, right? When we
right.
force the older to bring the younger with their friends, the
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
younger gets resented, right?
Right. Right.
However, if we try to find a way, a moment where the older can feel the younger belongs with my friends in this moment.
Mm,
Everybody has lunch together, right? How can we carve out a moment
right.
where the older can feel like the younger belongs? And then you don't have that strife of resentment and over neediness.
Yeah.
And we do that in society.
Balance.
Right.
You're
We
talking,
have that
it's all
strife
about
and
balance.
over neediness constantly in society. And as we try to do diversity, equity, and inclusion work, we're seeing people feeling taken from or minimized. And
Right.
those that we're trying to give to, include, accommodate, not feeling like they belong, and that what we're trying to do actually still isn't working. So we
Uh-huh. Yep.
if we're not thinking about how to do well for everyone, and that is a hard
It's so hard.
road, right?
Yeah,
I've
neither of us are saying this is an easy thing to
right,
do. Neither of us are saying, listen, it's just as easy as that. No, it takes constant work. So does parenting, though. And
right,
I
and
think we got stuck in this place of like, one of the reasons that the birth rate has been decreasing over time, there have been a few things to show, but is that there's a greater awareness that parenting is not all, you know, sitcoms where a problem gets solved in one episode type of philosophy, or prior to that, you don't talk about the problems. Everything is happy, smiley family on the outside, even if it's extremely defective on the inside. You know, so that it's a different, if it's a different model, there's a greater self-awareness of that, and that's a reason for the one of the reasons for the lowered birth rate. There's a lot more people who are choosing to remain child free. There's also, statistically speaking, just to throw this out there, the World Health Organization back recently in April just put out that globally 1 in 6 people will be affected by infertility. So there's a greater number of people. And I don't believe that that statistic even includes people who will never be able to have a heteronormative pregnancy. They will always have to seek assistance in family building. So, you know, or they have a heteronormative relationship, and let's say the person has been ill from an early childhood and is not able to. But, you know, those things are, regardless of where that stands on this area, I think it's really important, you know, one of the things you said, and I'd like to kind of just touch on this, is that what happens as human beings, our survival mechanism, if you go way back, I've been talking a lot about this recently, but if you go way back, one of the ways we survived as a species and evolved is because when you'd walk into a space and you'd see something that was different than you, different meant bad. And the reason that different meant bad was because you often saw a bad result from that difference. So let's say a caveman walks into a cave and there's a saber-toothed tiger standing there, looks different than me, different. It attacks him, hurts him, different, bad. So what actually got baked into a part of our survival mechanism was this idea of equating different to bad. And as a result, we fear different. And what breeds after fear? Anger and resentment. Fear breeds anger and resentment. So what happened is we had this pile stack, right? When we see something different than us, we become a lot more tribalistic because we fear that that different thing is going to impede on our humanity and is going to impede on our capacity to continue growing and living. It's literally a component of the survival mechanism. So I go back to this information idea again. Having that knowledge gives us the greater awareness to say, oh, I'm looking at this person and they look different than me, but where are our similarities? And once we start to try to reach into build similarities and rapport, we have a greater ability to build this beautiful, diverse world and not be so afraid of it.
Yeah, yes. When we can understand, one of the things that I talk about is the scarcity model of economics.
Mm.
The scarcity model of economics says there's not enough of anything for anyone. And we can certainly see evidence of that, right? Up until this last season, there was not enough water for Californians, right? Water was scarce. However, on the East Coast, water was abundant. We definitely see scarcity as part of what it is to be human. We've had supply chain issues because of the pandemic, right? Scarcity is part of our what it is to live. That's true. But scarcity allowed to become a law
Yep.
means we won't look for alternatives. You know, I'm pulling my hair out, and I understand that desalination is very expensive. I get that. But if we're looking at, you know, climate change, and we've got a West Coast that's regularly on fire and without water, can we please start investing in desalination plants, right? We're worried about the ocean rising. Great. for at least a moment of time. Let's suck some water out of it, remove the salt, and maybe we'll solve a problem or two for the short term, right? Until that's no longer a thing we should do, and we'll have to change and do something else, right? This scarcity idea that if you have something I won't
Right.
is baked into everything we do, which makes us constant enemies of one another. I have to get mine. And if you don't have yours, maybe I feel sad about that, but there's nothing I can do. I have to get mine. I have to take care of me and mine. And that's legit.
Survival
My
mechanism.
right. My personal worldview is that we will all have more for me and mine, you and yours,
Mhm.
if we're a bit more creative about how we do things together.
Right. Look at produce waste. We have so much produce waste. And I was watching something, it was really interesting. Like, when you walk into a grocery store and you see a scarcity of broccoli, okay? Most people will not go over there and pick the last broccolis. They need to see an abundance of the broccoli in order to feel like they have a lot of choices and they have like, oh, the abundance for some reason is more appealing. So grocers will actually say that what will happen is they'll get an abundance in and then that abundance goes bad and they're wasting it. Why do we have to do that? Why can't we walk into a grocery store, see like the last couple of fun, strawberries and produce or whatever it may be, and take that? It's okay, that's, but it's very interesting. I mean, statistically, I think it's just a part of our, again, it's a survival mechanism thing. It also has to do with there's a psychology component to this. But I wanted to go back to something you said, this idea that if there's not for me, there is for you, or vice versa, right? Also, problems. When we look at problems, here's how I see it. If you have a problem and I do nothing to help you with that problem, and that problem grows and grows, eventually that problem is going to become my problem too. So why not help you when I don't have a problem? And I think about it from the billionaire perspective, if there is somebody who's a billionaire, honestly, the overabundance of wealth at the top 5% of our society, in this, especially in this country and in the US, is frightening. What makes you feel that you need to hold on to that so tightly that you won't have enough for yourself? And I just, if I ever get to be that lucky, I'm going to honestly, even now, as I'm running a business and my husband works and, we're a middle income family, I still give away, because I always feel like the more I give away, the more comes back to me. It's a boomerang effect in a lot of ways. And I look at it from also unique perspective of a Holocaust survivor's child. There was that very famous quote by that priest, and I'm totally blanking on his name, about, first they came for the Jews and I
Mm-hmm.
didn't speak up because I wasn't a Jew, and so on and so on. So, right? If we look at it from that perspective, just because it's not your problem today doesn't mean it won't be your problem tomorrow.
Yeah, and I believe there are an infinite number of ways to solve everything. Right now, we're in a culture that says there's only one right way, and if I have a belief about it, then it's my way. Um, eh, and we're getting very, very limited in our ability to solution.
Right.
And so, if we can pull this back to parenting, there was the way we were raised, good or bad, or some combination thereof. There's the way we would like to parent.
Mhm.
There's the way we actually parent. Um, and then there's the need of our kids.
Yeah.
And are we creating a sense of shared experience within our families, that not that Please do not ask your child to pick their punishment. That's a
Oh
conversation
God.
for another day.
Yeah, we'll definitely
I
have to
don't
have that
mean
one.
ask your child to pick their punishment, but I do mean as soon as they have some kind of communication ability, whether it's verbal speech or writing or sign language or, whatever their ability to communicate their needs are, start really helping them figure out what's behind the hurt, what's behind the frustration, you mentioned EI before. I don't know if people know that that's emotional intelligence, right? Emotional
Well, the
intelligence is my
EI
world.
I was referencing was early intervention. We used to call
Okay,
it,
good. All
yeah,
right.
but
Well, in my world,
EI
it's
is
emotional
also
intelligence.
emotional
Okay.
intelligence. Yes.
Glad we clarified. Um,
Yeah.
in my world, it's emotional intelligence, and that's another thing we don't get taught.
Oh gosh, no.
So let's say you and I are out to lunch and you reach across the table and you're like, oh, that looks yummy. And you like take a forkful of my food. For some people, that would be a gift. Like, oh, we're so close, you'll eat off my plate.
Hmm.
For other people, we are no longer friends. Right? I don't know
It's
what you were
true.
thinking, but what the actual hell, right? Like,
Yep.
in order for us to be friends,
Hmm.
one, you might have to recognize my sense of closeness might be different from yours, and like self announce. I love to share food and I love to feel so close to somebody that I don't have to ask permission. Does that work for you?
Right.
And I might be like, I could segment a bite or two for you, and you like, right? Like we could solve
Right.
that. We could solve that.
Right.
Or I might have to say, can we find another representation of our closeness? Because my brain is going to break if you're taking my food, or if
Hmm.
your
Hmm.
spitted upon fork touches my plate, or right, there might be a lot of
Right.
reasons why somebody doesn't want you touching their plate.
Right. Right.
Both are legitimate.
And again, I go back to the platinum rule. If you're thinking about what's good for the other person, you're thinking less about yourself in that moment, again, but you can combine the two. You can say, again, like what you said, speak it aloud. I love to do this. What's your take on this? Oh, you don't like that. Okay, where can we meet in the middle? It's balance. But
And
can I
to
tell
me,
you
that's
something?
the parenting journey. To
Yes,
me,
balance. Teaching them.
yes, we need to help our children understand how to exist successfully in the world. I would advocate for, and I think you do as well, helping that child figure out how to exist in the world successfully as themselves,
Hmm.
not as a carbon copy of something we've been told they are supposed to be. And the
Yes.
way we help them succeed as themselves is by helping them learn to express
Yes.
who they are,
Hmm.
and then finding ways to be in relationship with them that work for both of you.
Yeah.
Parents, in my view, should not be getting walked all over, should not be overly like
Mm-mm.
stressed out and all of that because they're trying to do so much for their children.
Right, right.
There's
No,
got to be
there has to be a balance.
balance. There's got to be grace. There's
I
got to
agree.
be, and again, in my worldview, there's got to be help.
Yes, support. We
Right.
are by nature, humans are by nature tribalistic because we need the human connection to survive, right? An infant can't be born and survive on its own. Requires another human being to actually make it. So initially, so we created tribalist. We have that tribalistic instinct and that connection instinct built in. But here's the thing, I want to touch on that, what you just said really quickly, because I just think it's really important. Emotional intelligence. It's true. We're not born with social emotional learning. We learn that there the five areas of early child development are the motor skills, motor development. So that's gross and fine motor, communication. So that's both verbal and nonverbal communication, but also receptive and expressive communication skills. So, and I can go into that another time, but Then we have cognition, right? What we understand of our environment, how we absorb, or what we're absorbing, and how we're processing it in our brains. And then there's these two areas that get forgotten about so frequently that it drives me insane. One is social emotional development, and the other one is what we call self-help adaptive skills. And when we have time, I can delve into them, but the component to social emotional learning is in your child's ability to learn about their behaviors, learn about other people's behaviors, and recognize and accommodate their own emotional development behaviors amongst their peers. So, when somebody else is feeling sad, you're not laughing at them or ridiculing them. You're actually tapping into that empathy connection. When they are feeling sad, they're able to communicate it with you. I will give you a really fine example, and then I'm not sure how much time we have left, but
We're way over time, but we're good.
okay. My son Connor, one day, this was like he was 4, maybe. He he was standing there and he was getting really upset about something, and his little fists balled. His hands balled into little fists, and he's standing there and he goes, "Oh, mommy, I'm so mad at you. I could punch you." And my husband was behind him, and I see him about to step in, and I'm like, "Whoa," like I kind of gave him a wait, don't do that, And I said, "Oh, honey, I can see you're really angry, and that the XYZ is making you so angry. And what else are you feeling?" "Oh, I'm frustrated, and I'm da, da," And by the time we were done, he had gone from standing there with his fist balled to walking over to me, sitting down next to me, bawling his eyes out, letting it absorbing the hurt, and then I acknowledged how he was feeling, in the anger and the hurt, and then the fear and the sadness and the frustration. And then once he processed all that, he got up and he was like, "All right, let's go play." And my husband was like, "He can't talk to you that way." And I'm like, when you tell your kid how to behave rather than acknowledge their emotions first, you minimize and destabilize their emotions, and you tell them their emotions are wrong, their feelings are wrong. Was my son punching me? No, he was not. He was verbalizing how he felt, and children start to first verbalize how they feel by telling you what they would do with that feeling, because they don't have words to express what that feeling is driving in them. Most adults can't even express sometimes their emotions, right? Why do we expect children to? So telling him that he can't say those things means you're telling him he can't feel those things. And emotions are neither good nor bad. They are how we feel. It's what we do with those emotions that matters. Thoughts are neither good nor bad. They are the thoughts we have. What do we do with those thoughts next? That's what matters in how we proceed. And the more space we have to process our thoughts and feelings and our emotions and explore them and talk about them and unpack them, and then build in coping mechanisms for those emotions, right? I'm feeling so frustrated. I need to punch a pillow. I need to go journal. I need to listen to loud music. I need to talk it out. I need to get a hug. I need what? And again, these things are going to change over time. What they need when they're 5 is going to change when they're 18 on their coping mechanisms. But if you help them build in the fact that they can look for coping mechanisms by starting to explore those areas with them, you start to help them healthfully get those emotions processed. And when they can do that, they can behave a lot more appropriately. And it's very rare my son tells me in this day and age that he wants to punch me in the face. But he's only 5. So his brain development is way far off from that.
And for me, part of that is, yeah, we tell them that their emotions aren't okay, but we also tell them that they're not allowed to tell us about them.
Yes. Oh gosh.
What your son did was tell you how he felt, which allowed you to help him through how he felt.
Mm-hmm.
If somebody steps in and says, "You can't talk that way," we generally don't give an alternative, right? We just say that's not appropriate. Well, okay, so I guess I have to feel it and swallow it. And that's going to come out in some other way.
Yeah.
And one of the things we accidentally do is teach our children that we don't want them to tell us how they feel,
Yeah.
which is really confusing when we then sit down when they're like 12 to 18, like, honey, what's going on? How are you feeling? And they just look at us like, you're a crazy person. You've been telling me
Right.
since I was 2 that I'm not allowed to tell you how I feel. So one, I don't feel safe, and 2, I have no skills.
Right.
I've been
Oh,
shoving my feelings way down deep all of this time. I don't even have language to talk to you about this, let alone a sense of
yes.
safety.
Because here's the thing, we're not beaming our thought process to to anybody else. So what you're thinking, how you're feeling needs to be verbalized. You need to be able to communicate it out. But I want to touch on what you said before, because here's the thing, as parents, we have a tendency to say, don't do that. Don't do that. Don't do that. Don't hit your brother. Don't pull the rug.
Right.
Don't. Do you know what that does? You are slamming a door in your child's face and you're not opening another door they can walk through.
Right.
So start telling your kids what they can do. You don't want them to tear apart the cushion on the couch? Honey, in our house, we sit calmly and nicely on the cushions. Now, if you want to tear something, let's investigate what we can go tear. We can tear paper, we can tear this. Now you're changing, you're reframing what they can do, and you're opening a door for them, for that
Right.
desire to do something. Kids are very destructive, people.
Yeah, I
This is
have a
normal.
neurodivergent family that I coach, 3 neurodivergent children, both neurodivergent parents, and the kids are doing a lot of hitting of each other. And they're all getting old enough where the hitting is damaging, right? Like, it's not safe. And I needed to help the parents learn, don't try to get the kids to stop hitting, give them something else to hit, right?
Mhm.
We have to get our energy out. And if all we do is tell the child to hold the energy, it's going to come out some other way. The next time they hit their sibling, it could be devastating, right? So it's not about, don't aggressively express your emotions, because especially as children and neurodivergent folks, we could feel at like 10 plus all the time, right? If it's a
Oh,
volume
yeah.
dial. For some of us, our emotions are either not or all, and
Yeah.
there's not a lot of in between.
Right.
And so if you're talking about developing neurodivergent children, their all in is going to be exceptional. Right?
Yep. Yeah, they're not just going to be angry, they're going to bite you. I cannot tell
Right.
you how many staff I've had who have been bitten, smacked, punched, thrown chairs at. Yeah.
But that's because that energy has to go somewhere.
Right. It has to be
And
funneled.
if all we see is the bad child because they bit or they hit,
Right.
we don't give them any tools for solutioning what's
Mhm.
going on within them. And so we are accidentally, with all of the love in our hearts, we are accidentally limiting and even traumatizing our children when we're trying to help them learn appropriate behaviors, right?
Label the behavior, not the child. This is something my mom did to me terribly. She used to say, "You're such a bad kid. You're so
Yeah.
awful." She would, I mean, she said some pretty awful things about me and to me. Um, and it took me a long time to finally voice to her, I'm not a bad person, but I may have done a bad thing. Like the behavior is what you need to label and correct, and you need to correct it with a reframe instead of trying to correct it with by limiting their capacity to express it.
Yeah. And I take it actually a step further than that. And I don't, most behaviors I won't say are bad.
Yeah.
They may not be our best choice for what we're trying to accomplish, right? What were we trying to accomplish? When you punched your brother in the face, what were you trying to accomplish? Well, they were trying to accomplish hurting their sibling,
Mhm.
but why? Right? What did they think in the inflicting of pain was going to result in? Because the children are always spectacularly shocked when the sibling hits them back or goes crying to mommy, or right,
Right.
like that processing of being able to understand what this action leads to just isn't there, depending on the age
Oh yeah, no.
and ability of the child. So, okay, I understand you wanted to have them be hurt, but we got to figure out why, because
Oh
them
my goodness.
being hurt doesn't result in what you wanted. And at
Deepest
some point,
apologies.
yeah, you have to go.
I am gonna interrupt you. I completely forgot that I do have
You
I
have
do
another
have to
meeting.
go.
Yeah, we went
Yeah, I
way
do.
over time. We were
Way
way
over
over
time.
time. So this was fun, and we're
Yeah, this is
obviously going
so
to have to
great.
talk more. You will be
We'll have to
back to be
edit that.
talking
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
your history as a child of a Holocaust survivor. I can't wait for
Yeah.
that conversation. So thank
Yeah.
you so much for being with me,
Absolutely. It was
and
so wonderful.
we will talk
Okay.
again soon.
Absolutely. Okay. Be well. Bye.